Welcome back to Epic Boring History. Go ahead and dim the lights. Fluff your pillow. Maybe let a fan hum softly in the corner. Tonight, we're heading far west to the long frozen nights of the American frontier. Before we saddle up, a bit of housekeeping. If you genuinely enjoy this calm wander through time, you're warmly invited to like and subscribe. Not out of duty only if it helps you drift off smiling. And do share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, settle in. The fire's low. The world's gone quiet. You blink awake under a wool blanket, the sound of wind pushing through the cracks of a log cabin. The year could be 1872 or any year the Wild West refused to sleep easily. Let's begin. The last sliver of daylight always leaves faster than you expect. Out here on the far edge of everything that pretends to be civilization, sunset feels less like a gentle fade and more like someone blowing out a candle. The prairie stretches endlessly around you, a quilt of dry grass and frozen mud, dotted with the occasional stunted tree that looks as tired as you feel. The sky melts from gold to bruised purple, and just like that, the warmth goes with it. You stand outside the cabin for a moment longer than you should, watching your breath puff in small clouds that drift away like half-forgotten thoughts. The cold nips at your fingers, seeps through your boots, brushes your cheeks until your skin feels more like paper than flesh. There's beauty in it, yes, but it's the kind of beauty you admire briefly, before running for your life. The Wild West at sunset is breathtaking, but mostly because it's trying to take your breath. Inside your small cabin being an ambitious term for what is essentially a wooden box, the air already feels cooler than you like. The walls are made of logs roughly stacked together, with chinks between them stuffed with mud, moss, and hope. You spent the summer plugging every gap you could find, but the wind has an uncanny way of discovering new ones. It moves through the cracks with confidence, like an unwanted guest who knows exactly where the best chair is. You close the door behind you, latch it, and lean against the rough wood for a moment. The silence is immense, even the wind. It seems to pause, gathering itself before the next assault. You can hear the faint ticking of the cooling stove, the soft creak of timbers settling as the temperature drops another notch. The smell of smoke lingers in the air, comforting, if you don't think too much about how dependent you are on it. The frontier at night is a study in contrasts. The world outside your door is vast, merciless, and cold enough to make steel groan. Inside, you have a small fire, a few rough-hewn boards, and the illusion of control. The hearth flickers weakly, casting long shadows across the room. You can see your breath in the air if you exhale too fast. Flame pops as a knot burns through, and for a moment, you worry it'll go out. You always worry it'll go out. If you were back east, maybe you'd be sitting in a parlor right now, reading by lamplight. But out here, books are scarce, candles are precious, and the night is long. You rely on the rhythm of small tasks to keep your sanity, banking the fire, shaking out the blankets, checking the door latch twice, once for peace of mind. Routine is what keeps you from thinking too much about the vast, indifferent wilderness pressing in on all sides. You move around the room, doing your evening inspection. The windows are frosted at the edges, delicate patterns blooming across the glass. You run a finger along one and feel the bite of ice. The water in the bucket is starting to crust over again, a bad sign. You make a mental note to move it closer to the fire before bed, not that it will help much. The air feels heavy, like it's holding its breath, waiting for the true cold to arrive. The smell of old wood, tallow, and smoke fills your lungs. It's not pleasant exactly, but it's yours. Every frontier cabin has its own scent, part home, part hardship. There's something oddly grounding about it. You pour yourself a cup of water from the bucket, the surface cracking softly as you dip it in. The first sip is metallic, faintly smoky. It tastes like survival. You check the window again, as if expecting something to appear out there, a rider, a wolf, a reminder that you aren't as alone as you feel. But there's nothing. It's just the vast dark plains stretching into oblivion. The only light is the faint glimmer of frost catching moonlight, and the occasional flicker of your fire through the window glass. This is the part of night when the land goes quiet, but your thoughts get loud. You start remembering why you came here, for freedom, or opportunity, or maybe just the promise that there was somewhere else to be. But the West doesn't give comfort easily. It's magnificent, yes, but indifferent. You came here to start over, and instead you've become a character in a slow, freezing meditation. You sit near the fire, holding your hands out to the warmth that barely reaches your fingertips. The flames dance and twist, mocking the darkness but never quite banishing it. Your body begins to relax, though your mind stays alert. Trained by experience to expect the small surprises of frontier nights, a creak that might be a shifting log, or a gust that slams the shutter loose again. The warmth soothes you just enough to remember that you still have a bed to prepare. A humble thing, some straw, a blanket, and a few hopes stitched into the seams. But at this hour, even that sounds like luxury. The thought of lying down feels almost decadent. The body doesn't ask for much out here, a bit of heat, something soft beneath it, and the reassurance that the roof won't cave in. Outside, the first wolf howl cuts through the distance. Long, low, and almost melodic. The kind of sound that would make your blood run cold if it weren't already halfway frozen. You smile faintly because it's somehow fitting. The Wild West doesn't sleep quietly. Even the wilderness has insomnia. You stoke the fire one last time, watching the sparks leap upward. Small rebellions against the dark. The day is gone. The night stretches ahead, long, uncertain, and full of potential frostbite. Pull your coat tighter, listening to the wind trace its fingers along the cabin walls. It's a strange comfort, that sound. A reminder that you're not alone, just vastly outnumbered. The bed is waiting for you, or at least something that insists it's a bed. You wouldn't call it inviting. More like a necessary truce between exhaustion and gravity. It's a rectangle of planks nailed together, creaking with self-doubt, holding a burlap sack stuffed with straw that's seen better seasons. You give it the kind of look people usually reserve for a suspicious piece of meat. The straw has settled unevenly, forming gentle valleys and surprising hills, a topography of discomfort. There's a faint smell of dust, hay, and faintly of something that used to be alive. You don't ask questions, you just lower yourself down carefully. Listening to the slow crunch beneath you, the sound of prairie grass surrendering to your weight. Congratulations! You're now lying on what passes for a bed in the Wild West. If you shift your shoulder an inch, the straw squeaks in protest. If you roll over, a few stalks poke through the burlap, like they're personally offended by your attempt at rest. Sometimes you think of the fine feather mattresses people back east talk about, and then you remind yourself that feathers belong to chickens. Chickens belong to dinner, not furniture. Out here, every creature and every scrap of material has a higher calling than luxury. The blanket on top is wool, dense and scratchy, with that slightly damp smell that never seems to leave no matter how long it has aired out. It's warm, though, or warm enough if you keep perfectly still and convince yourself not to notice the draft creeping up from the floorboards. You tuck it under your chin, your nose cold enough to feel like it might simply chip off and roll away. Sometimes the straw pokes just right, and you start thinking of it as a kind of frontier acupuncture. You can tell yourself it's therapeutic, aligning the spirit or whatever needs to be aligned at this hour. But mostly it just keeps you awake a little longer. You can hear the wind against the walls again, pressing its hand along the seams of the cabin, finding new places to enter. It feels alive, nosy, almost playful. Like the night itself, can believe you thought you could get cozy out here. There's a trick to sleeping on straw. You'll learn it after enough restless nights. You lie still as possible, breathe shallowly, and avoid thinking about what might be living in the bedding with you, because there's always something. Tiny guest fleas, mites, the occasional mouse who thinks your bed is the warmest spot in town. You become philosophical about it after a while. Everything's just trying to survive the winter, including you. You remember when you first built this thing, hammering planks together with hands that were too cold to grip the nails properly? It looked sturdy enough in daylight, until night revealed its true personality, slightly crooked, slightly squeaky, and extremely judgmental. You even tried to make it fancy once, tossing a few rabbit skins over the top for softness. It helped, though every so often a bit of fur sticks to your sleeve, reminding you that the line between comfort and critter is very thin indeed. It's not that you expect comfort out here. Comfort belongs to people who have wallpaper and chairs that match. What you have is survival, one blanket and one stubborn heartbeat at a time. But lying here, you start to notice how the body adapts. The first few nights you woke up aching, every joint filing complaints. Now, though your back knows the terrain, you've learned to find the softest patch, the right angle, the sweet spot where discomfort becomes tolerable. There's a sound the straw makes when you exhale into stillness, a faint whisper, dry and fragile. It reminds you that this bed came from the same grassland you worked all day. The same ground that fed the horses, that swayed in summer heat, now cradles you in its brittle, golden remains. There's a strange poetry to that if you squint hard enough. You adjust your blanket, feeling the texture of coarse wool against your cheek. The warmth is uneven. It starts near your chest, but fades toward your feet, where cold always wins the argument. Sometimes you warm stones by the fire and tuck them near your toes before bed. It's a primitive luxury that lasts about an hour, until the stones cool and become the coldest things in the universe. Then you kick them away, hoping they won't roll under your back. Still, the bed has its charms. It's yours. You built it. You patched it. And you've cursed it through long nights of sleeplessness. But in a land where so much is uncertain, this sagging, splintered rectangle is the one place that knows your shape. Outside, the wind picks up again. The log walls pop and sigh, expanding and contracting with the temperature. The sound blends with the faint rustle of straw each time you move. The fire across the room has died down to a dull glow, its warmth barely reaching you. You can feel the cold sneaking up again, a slow tide crawling from the corners of the cabin. You pull the blanket tighter. The fabric scratches your chin, but you don't care anymore. You've made peace with imperfection. The straw rustles one last time as you settle your weight and let your body surrender to fatigue. The line between waking and sleeping feels thin as parchment, and you drift somewhere in between, half aware of your surroundings, half lost to dreams. For a moment, you imagine what a feather mattress would feel like. Then you laugh softly at yourself. Which feathers or straw, soft or hard, you'd still be here, under this same roof, in this same strange silence. Sleep, in the Wild West, isn't about comfort. It's about endurance, with a sense of humor. You shift again, listening to the small symphony of creaks, crunches, and sighs that make up your nightly soundtrack. The bed groans beneath you, the cabin breathes, the wind hums outside. Everything is alive in its own quiet way. And as your eyelids grow heavier, you start to understand why some people just gave up on beds altogether and slept on the floor.
The floor doesn't look like much, but tonight it feels like an invitation. After all, the bed has betrayed you enough times, poking, creaking, sagging like a tired mule. So you spread your blanket straight onto the rough-hewn boards, the wood cool and slightly uneven beneath your palms, and you think, well, maybe this is the real frontier experience. There's a certain honesty to sleeping on the floor. It doesn't pretend to be comfortable. It just is. Solid, cold, unmoving, like the West itself. You can feel the chill rising from the planks, creeping through your blanket, up your spine. The boards hold the night's cold like old grudges. You lie still, hoping your body heat will make some kind of truce with it. Back east, people might imagine pioneers tucked under cozy quilts in tidy cabins, but those people have never met a true Western floor. Out here, sleeping on the ground is less a choice and more a negotiation. Sometimes the bed is too lumpy. Sometimes it's occupied by something that bites, and sometimes you're just too tired to climb into it. So you find a good patch of floor, the kind without too many cracks or stray nails, and you make yourself a nest. 2 blankets if you're lucky. One for under, one for over. If you've got none to spare, you just wrap yourself like a burrito and hope your toes forgive you by morning. But humans, even exhausted ones, have an instinct for coziness. That's where the blanket fort comes in. Not the kind with couch cushions and childhood laughter. No, this one is born out of survival. You drape a few blankets from a chair back to a crate, maybe the edge of the bed, forming a little tent. A small, pocket-sized world where the air warms just a bit faster, where the wind can't quite reach you, and where you can almost pretend you're safe. Inside the fort, your breath fogs faintly in the lantern glow. The air smells of wool, wood smoke, and dust. It's not much, but it's yours. You can almost feel the walls holding in the heat from your body, like the blanket itself is a quiet animal keeping watch. Sometimes entire families slept like this, bundled together on the cabin floor, shoulder to shoulder, blankets layered like sediment. Children in the middle, adults on the outside, forming a human wall against the draft. The night's rhythm was simple. Someone coughed, someone snored, someone turned over and took half the blanket with them. But for all the discomfort, there was something reassuring about it. A pile of breathing bodies meant life, warmth, and another day survived. The floor itself told stories. Each board creaked in its own way, like the voice of the house settling into the cold. You could trace the soft hum of the wind outside through the gaps, a kind of nighttime language. Some people would sprinkle a bit of flour or ash near the door to see if mice or snakes had paid a visit overnight. It wasn't paranoia. It was practical. After all, warmth attracts all sorts of visitors. On the worst nights, when even the floor felt like a sheet of ice, you could try sleeping closer to the hearth. That was the prize spot. A few feet from the fading glow of the fire, where warmth and smoke mingled into something almost comforting. You'd risk waking up with soot in your hair or sparks in your blanket, but it was worth it. You'd take the smell of ash over the bite of frost any night. And still, somehow, people found peace in these makeshift sleeping arrangements. You'd lie there, staring at the shadows that flicker across the low ceiling, hearing the slow crackle of wood, and the sigh of the wind, and realize that this raw, imperfect coziness is how generations survived. Not with luxury, but with layers. The blanket fort glows faintly from the inside, like a lantern of fabric. The small space amplifies the sound of your breathing, the heartbeat in your ears. The cold is still there, of course. It always is. But inside your little fortress of wool and stubbornness, it feels manageable. Like the winter can't quite find you for a few hours. Sometimes you even start to enjoy it. The closeness, the stillness, the feeling that you've carved a pocket of warmth out of the unyielding cold. The floor has become part of your nightly ritual now, your unlikely friend. You know every knot, every groove, every creak. When the wind howls, you press your palm against the boards and feel the hum of the earth beneath you. Eventually, your body goes numb in all the right ways. The ache dulls, the cold softens. The blankets grow heavier as your breath warms the air inside your fort. You stop shivering. You stop thinking. And for a while, you just exist. A small, warm creature curled on the edge of a vast, frozen world. Out here, comfort is never guaranteed. But on nights like this, lying on the floor, wrapped in your own invention, you realize that warmth isn't always about fire or feather beds. Sometimes it's about making do with what you have, and still managing to dream.
You start to notice that life in the frontier winter revolves around a single obsession. Fire. Not love, not gold, not glory. Just flame. The small, crackling, moody, miraculous thing that stands between you and becoming a very convincing ice sculpture. In daylight, the fire feels like a simple companion, cheerful, chatty, well-behaved. It pops and snaps in the hearth like an old friend telling stories, painting everything in amber light. But at night, when the cold seeps through the cracks in the walls and the air outside turns blue with frost, the relationship changes. The fire becomes something deeper, almost sacred. You sit by it, palms out, face prickling from the heat while your back stays frozen. You could swear it's mocking you a little, because here's the truth. Fire is no easy friend. It's greedy, demanding. It eats everything you can give it and still wants more. You can't just light it and walk away, not in this world. You have to nurse it, feed it, coax it like a spoiled child that knows it has the upper hand. You start by picking your fuel carefully. Hardwoods like oak or hickory, if you're lucky enough to find them, burn slow and hot. Pine burns fast and smells like heaven, but it leaves behind sticky soot that clogs your chimney. Once that chimney fills with creosote, well, congratulations, your cozy log cabin now doubles as a torch. So you make a ritual of it. Every morning, before your breath even stops fogging the air, you rake through the ashes from the night before, hunting for a faint red ember, a survivor. If you find one, you cradle it gently, whisper a small thank you, and feed it dry shavings, then twigs, then kindling. It's a quiet, hopeful moment, almost like prayer. If the ember catches, you live another day with warmth. If not, it's time to start from scratch. Flint and steel in hand, shivering like a penitent soul. The smell of smoke becomes a constant in your life. It's in your hair, your clothes, your blankets, your bread. The fire gives warmth, yes, but it also paints you with its scent. You learn to love it in a strange way. Smoke means survival. Smoke means home. And yet, as much as you depend on it, you never quite trust it. One spark too high, one gust through the chimney, and the fire turns from ally to enemy in the blink of an eye. People learn that lesson fast. Whole homesteads went up because someone fell asleep too close to the hearth, or because a stray coal rolled onto the floorboards while everyone was too tired to notice. You'd think you'd rest easy near a fire, but no, it's a light you watch, not one you ignore. Its glow flickers across the walls, painting the cabin in restless gold. Shadows stretch and sway, and every now and then the fire pops loud enough to make you flinch. You glance toward the chimney, making sure the sparks stay where they belong. Its warmth wrapped in risk, comfort laced with caution. Sometimes, on those impossibly cold nights, when the air outside feels like it's made of glass, the fire almost seems alive. It breathes. It hums. You can hear it working. Each crackle sounds like a heartbeat, steady and stubborn. You lean close, staring into its orange core, and it almost feels like it's staring back. This primal, ancient force that humans have both worshipped and feared since time began. The fire is never quite enough, though. The moment you stop feeding it, it begins to fade. So you plan your night like a small military campaign. A few thick logs before bed, maybe a half-burned stump to last till morning. You pull your blankets tight, trusting that the coals will hold out until dawn. But sometimes they don't. You wake in the middle of the night to a room gone dark, the warmth gone thin. The silence feels heavier when the fire is dead. No crackle, no hiss, just the faint whistle of the wind pressing through the chinks in the wall. You sit up, rubbing your hands, and stare at the hearth's faint gray glow. The world beyond that tiny square of ash feels infinite and cold. You debate whether to get up to fumble for your boots, fetch another log, rekindle the embers. You don't want to, but you do, 'cause out here laziness isn't charming, it's frostbite. So you shuffle over, teeth chattering, and breathe life back into your fickle ally. Slowly, grudgingly, it returns, a flicker, a flame, a bloom of heat that spreads across the room. The orange light climbs the walls again, softening everything it touches. You crawl back into bed, or floor nest, or blanket fort, and feel that delicate wave of warmth crawl back over you. It's not much, but it's enough. Enough to make your eyelids heavy, to soften the edge of the cold, to let you imagine just for a little while that you reach safe from the world outside. You meet your next great ally in the endless war against the cold, the cast iron stove. It's heavy, black, and utterly unapologetic. A lump of metal that looks like it should sink a small boat. Yet somehow, it keeps entire families alive through winter nights that could make a wolf reconsider its career choices. At first glance, it's not much to look at. Just a box of iron with a small door, a flue pipe, and legs that always seem a little too dainty for its weight. But when you lift the lid, when you drop in wood, and hear that deep, echoing clang, it feels like opening a small portal to civilization. You've graduated from the open hearth, where heat escaped up the chimney faster than you could make it, to something almost modern. The cast iron stove is your first taste of controlled comfort, or, at least, comfort that pretends to be controlled. Lighting it becomes a ceremony. You kneel before the stove like an apprentice monk before a relic. Kindling first, arranged carefully. Then the heavier wood, then the cautious strike of flint. You hear that faint whoosh as flame takes hold and begins its quiet devouring. The stove doesn't roar like an open fire. It hums, purrs, radiates. Within minutes, you can feel the heat rolling off the iron in waves, thick and steady. You notice how different the air feels. Not the sharp, uneven flicker of a hearth. This is even dense warmth, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes your eyelids want to close. It's a dry heat, too, tinged with the faint metallic smell of the stove and the sweet smoke of whatever wood you scrounged that week. Hickory if you're lucky, cottonwood if you're not. Either way, the stove doesn't complain. It just burns. The cast iron stove isn't just for warmth, it's the heart of the home. It cooks your stew, dries your boots, warms your hands, and occasionally threatens to burn down your cabin if you forget to open the damper. It's your kitchen, your furnace, your gathering point. Every scar on its surface tells a story. A skillet slid too hard, kettle boiled over, a midnight log thrown in with sleepy hands. Sometimes, on freezing mornings, you press your palms against its side just long enough to feel the sting of heat. You hover there, eyes closed, until you almost forget that outside the walls the wind is painting frost on the windows like lace. The stove hums quietly, steady and loyal, a miracle forged by human stubbornness and a blacksmith's patience. And yet, like the fire before it, the stove has moods. Feed it too much wood and it smokes the room until your eyes water. Neglect the pipe, and it fills with soot until the whole place smells like a chimney's bad dream. You'll learn to listen to it, the hiss that means the damper's too tight, the sigh that says the draft's just right. Over time, you and the stove develop a kind of language. It grumbles. You answer. It exhales. You nod. The iron becomes a teacher of patience, reminds you that heat takes time, that warmth is something earned, not instantly summoned with a switch. You wait, you tend, you adapt. You adapt. And in the quiet of the long night, when the wind rattles the shutters, and snow drifts high against the door, you find a strange peace in its low. Rhythmic clicks as the metal expands and contracts. Every frontier home has one. Some are plain, some ornate, with carved flourishes and brass handles, the pride of a successful merchant's wife. Others are dented hand-me-downs, patched with wire, salvaged from wagons or old posts. But all of them share one truth. The cast iron stove means survival, civilization in miniature order imposed on chaos. You can picture it glowing faintly red in the dark, the air above it shimmering like heat haze. Someone's boots rest nearby, steaming faintly. Kettle hums on the lid, spitting tiny bursts of vapor that catch the light like ghosts. The whole cabin smells faintly of iron, smoke, and stew, the perfume of endurance. If the fire was your ancient, unpredictable companion, the stove is your tamed beast, strong, solid, but always deserving of respect. You wouldn't dream of falling asleep with its door open or stacking wood too high inside. You treat it the way sailors treat the sea, grateful, reverent, a little wary. When the nights stretch long and your dreams mix with the sound of the wind, you half listen to the stove's gentle ticking, that calm metallic heartbeat. It becomes the soundtrack of winter itself, proof that you've built something that can withstand the cold, the dark, and time. Tomorrow you'll wake and open its door to a bed of glowing coals, red as embers in a dragon's chest. You'll stir them, feed them, and watch the flame bloom again, outside. The frost might have claimed the world, but in here, the miracle holds steady. And as you sit with your coffee warming on the stove lid, you well think, perhaps for the 100th time, that it's a small miracle what a little iron, fire, and faith can do. Somewhere in the corner, the shadows dance gently, and you can almost hear the stove's slow exhale. It's not speaking, but it's saying something just the same. You've made it through another night. No matter how well your fire burns, how valiantly your cast iron stove hums through the night, there comes a moment, usually around 3 in the morning, when even iron gives up. The warmth thins, the air grows heavy and still. You can feel the chill creeping back, polite but insistent, like an uninvited guest tapping on your bones. That's when you remember the oldest, simplest survival rule on the frontier. If the fire fades, use people. Sleeping close together isn't a sentimental choice here, it's physics. Human beings are furnaces, inefficient, slightly damp furnaces, but furnaces nonetheless. So you learn quickly that sharing warmth isn't an act of affection, it's an act of strategy. The pioneers called it bundling in, and it wasn't romantic. It was necessity with a side of elbows and morning breath. You'd pile under whatever covers you owned, quilts, old coats, buffalo hides, or stitch together flour sacks, if that's all you had, and lie close enough to hear the heartbeat of the person next to you. You'd tuck your knees behind theirs, your face into the crook of their neck, and breathe in unison until the rhythm lulled you towards sleep. And for families, that meant everyone. Children, maybe a hired hand if space was tight, all arranged like a human jigsaw puzzle beneath the same patchwork of blankets. The night would start with shifting and complaints. Move your foot, you're hogging the quilt, who let the dog in? But within minutes, the complaints would fade into the slow, heavy breathing of exhaustion. There's a strange kind of comfort in that closeness. The smell of wool and smoke, the sound of another person's breath, the steady warmth that passes skin to skin. You might not love everyone in that bed, but in the deep of winter, love is a luxury. Body heat is currency. And tonight, you're rich. You learn to sleep like a survivalist, not sprawling, but layered. You know which position traps the most, heat curled tight, knees to chest, back to another warm body. You know which fabrics feel forgiving, and which ones freeze to your skin. You learn that even in sleep, your body negotiates with the cold, adjusting, seeking balance. Sometimes, though, it's not just family you share warmth with. Travelers passing through, neighbors whose cabins have burned, or widows and children without stoves, they might find themselves welcomed into the circle. Out here, generosity isn't a virtue, it's a policy. You share what warmth you have, because someday you might be the one knocking on a stranger's door with frost on your eyelashes. Of course, not everyone preferred company. Some loners chose solitude, cowboys under the open sky, trappers in snow-packed shacks, prospectors deep in the hills. For them, shared warmth often meant a bedroll with a dog curled against their legs. A good dog, they said, was worth another blanket and twice as loyal. You might not talk much to a dog, but you both understood the deal. Warmth for warmth. And yet, whether it's people or pets, there's something ancient about this need to huddle. The same instinct that drew mammoths into herds and birds into flocks lives in you. The fire burns in the hearth, yes, but the real heat is made of proximity, the soft press of life against life. You think, sometimes, as you drift between waking and sleep, how thin the line is between comfort and survival. Here they are the same thing. There are no heated blankets, no thermostats. Just breathing, steady and slow, pooling warmth beneath the covers. When the wind howls outside and the snow whispers against the roof, you pull closer without thinking. The body beside you shifts, sighs, settles. The sound of their breathing becomes the lullaby of the frontier, a reminder that for now you are not alone in the cold. Sometimes, when the stove's last ember fades to gray, you open your eyes to the faint blue glow of dawn creeping through the cracks in the wall. You realize that you've survived another night not because of strength, or bravery, or even the fire, but because someone was close enough to share the warmth. And in that small, quiet realization, there's a flicker of gratitude, not loud or sentimental, but deep. You don't say it, of course. No one does. You just untangle yourself from the blankets, stretch, and start the morning routine of coaxing the stove back to life. But as you do, the air still carries the memory of shared breath, of warmth, traded in the dark. It's a kind of currency that never runs out, one you'll spend again tonight when the cold returns, 'cause it always does. When it does, you'll be ready with quilts, with quiet company. And with the knowledge that sometimes the simplest form of survival is just the courage to stay close. At some point, after you've done all you can with fire, iron, and shared humanity, you begin to look elsewhere for warmth, namely, to the creatures who have been quietly chewing their cud just beyond your cabin walls. Yes, cows, you might laugh.
Oh.
But in the Wild West winter, cow could mean the difference between shivering through the night and actually waking up the next morning. Out here, the rules of luxury are flexible. If it's alive, large, and radiates heat, it's part of your heating system. The barn, or more accurately, the leaning wooden structure, pretending to be one, is no longer just a shelter for animals. It's a living furnace, powered by breath and biology. Step inside on a January night, and you're hit by a wave of warmth that feels miraculous after the brittle cold outside. The air smells of hay, damp earth, and life. It's not perfumed by any civilized standard, but after days of frozen air, even the smell of manure is oddly comforting. It's the scent of survival. You can hear the cows shift and sigh, their heavy bodies pressing into straw, their movements slow and unhurried. Their breath puffs out in little clouds, joining yours in a kind of gentle, steamy chorus, and they are surrounded by their quiet chewing and the soft thud of hooves. You understand something profound. Warmth doesn't always come from fire. Sometimes it comes from company, even if that company has horns. In especially brutal winters, many settlers chose to sleep in the barn with their livestock. It's not beside them, Exactly, though, in desperate cases, yes. Sometimes literally beside them, but close enough to borrow their collective heat. A cow gives off roughly as much warmth as a small campfire, and if you've got a dozen of them, well, congratulations. You live inside a slow-moving, slightly fragrant furnace. You spread a blanket in the loft above the animals, where the rising heat collects and lingers. The floorboards radiate a gentle, earthy warmth through your bedding, and the sounds below the low moos, the rustle of straw, lull you into something close to peace. It's not luxury, but in the grand scale of frontier comfort, it's practically spowl. And truth be told, it's a fair trade. The cows keep you warm, and you, in turn, keep them safe. You listen for wolves, for the crack of ice on the roof, for any sign that the fragile line between inside and outside is broken. In this strange, shared domesticity, you're both protectors and beneficiaries. Of course, the arrangement has its less poetic side. The barn air is rich. You wake with hay tangled in your hair, your skin sticky with the scent of animals. Your clothes will never quite lose that smell, a mix of smoke, sweat, and cow breath. But there's something humble, even grounding about it. The frontier strips away pride and replaces it with practicality. You stop worrying about how things look or smell or sound, and start caring about whether they work. And this works. You think about how city folk, in their fine parlors back east, might wrinkle their noses at the thought. They'd imagine you huddled among beasts, muttering apologies to a cow for stealing her heat. But out here, nobody judges. Out here, a cow is family, an employer, and occasionally your most reliable roommate. Sometimes when the wind outside howls so hard it shakes the boards loose, you lay your hand on the flank of the nearest cow. Feeling the slow rhythm of her breathing, steady, warm, unbothered, you envy her calm. You wonder if she even feels the cold at all with her thick hide and tranquil gaze. There's a strange comfort in that serenity, a reminder that life continues even when the world freezes solid. The barn becomes more than a refuge. It becomes a kind of chapel. The flicker of your lantern glows against the hay. The low hum of animals replaces hymns, and you kneel not in prayer, but in gratitude for the shared breath. For the warmth of another living body, for the reminder that survival doesn't have to be noble, just has to be shared. Eventually, dawn seeps through the cracks in the wood, and you wake to a barn full of sleepy creatures stirring. Frost still clings to the beams, but you can feel the promise of light pressing its way in. You stretch, stiff and straw-coated, and listen to the soft chorus of lowing. It's not elegant, but it's home. You'll move back to the cabin soon enough, feed the fire, stir the coals, hang your wet clothes by the stove. But for now, you linger a moment longer in the barn's gentle heat. You look at the cows, your unlikely companions, and nod a quiet thanks. Because out here, survival is a team effort. Whether it's neighbors, family, or a herd of patient, unbothered cows, everyone gives what warmth they can. And as you step out into the morning cold, breath curling into the pale sky, you can almost still feel the ghost of that barn heat clinging to you, an invisible reminder that, in the Wild West, even the humblest creatures had a role in keeping you alive. Before you crawl beneath the heap of blankets, furs, or possibly your nearest cow, there's an essential ritual that every Wild West sleeper must master: dressing for bed. Or, more accurately, arming yourself for bed. Because in the 1880s frontier winter, sleep isn't so much a peaceful escape as it is a nightly battle against physics. Forget everything you know about pajamas, silk. No, flannel. Possibly, if you're lucky. Most likely, your sleepwear looks a lot like your daywear, minus the boots and the faint smell of dust from whatever you wrangled, chopped or chased earlier. Changing into something soft and clean sounds lovely in theory, but in a cabin where your breath hangs, visible in the air, and your water pitcher has frozen solid overnight, stripping down is less about comfort and more about reckless optimism. So you go to bed in layers. Shirt, undershirt, maybe another shirt on top of that. Wool trousers if you've got them, or long johns if you were lucky enough to find a general store that still had some in stock. Socks 2 pairs if they're not too stiff from the cold. And perhaps the most prized possession of all, knitted woolen drawers, or what some might coyly call union suits, those charming full-body undergarments with a flap in the back and a level of practicality unmatched even today. Button by button, you fasten yourself into warmth like a soldier into armor. The wool itches a little, but you don't care. That mild irritation is a sign you're not freezing yet. You might even wrap a scarf around your neck or pull on a cap. Because heat leaves the body fastest from the places that seem least important until they start hurting. For women on the frontier, the bedtime wardrobe was an even more strategic affair. Petticoats and corsets came off, but not everything did. A flannel nightdress, thick stockings, and sometimes even a shawl or apron stayed on. You might not look glamorous, more like a walking laundry pile, but nobody was judging. If someone was close enough to see you in your bedtime cocoon, chances are they were too cold to care. And then there were the small luxuries. Some folks heated bricks by the fire and wrapped them in cloth to tuck at their feet. Others filled tin bottles with warm water, though warm was a fleeting state out here. You might even rub a bit of bear grease or lard into your hands to keep the skin from cracking. Though it leaves a scent that stays with you until spring, every small comfort counts, so every trick is remembered. Of course, there's the question of hygiene. The truth is, there wasn't much of it. Baths were rare in winter, not out of laziness, but out of pure self-preservation. No one wants to stand naked in a freezing cabin while trying to splash themselves clean with icy water that turns to frost before it hits the floor. You might wash your face, maybe your hands, but the rest waits until the thaw. Sleep, therefore, comes with a certain earthy fragrance, smoke, sweat, and wool, a scent that would horrify a Victorian parlor, but comfort anyone who knows what survival smells like. Then comes the last step of the nightly preparation, managing your hair. Long hair is an excellent insulator, but it also tangles, collects soot, and has a remarkable talent for finding its way into other people's mouths during shared sleep arrangements. So you braid it, tuck it under a scarf, or if you're a man with a beard, you might find frost forming on it by morning if you sleep too close to a draft. Truly, everyone looks slightly haunted by midwinter. You check your surroundings before crawling in, the fire's low, but steady, the iron stove ticking gently. Your boots near enough to reach in case something startles you awake. The blankets are heavy, sometimes wool, sometimes fur, sometimes just old clothes layered together until they weigh as much as a person. When you lie down, it's less like resting and more like being pressed into the earth by gravity itself. For a few minutes, you fidget. The wool scratches, the layers twist, and a small patch of cold air sneaks in somewhere around your neck. You adjust your scarf. You curse quietly. Then, slowly, the body heat builds. You can feel the air beneath the covers grow dense and warm. Like a private microclimate you've earned through sheer stubbornness, and in that stillness, you find something close to comfort. You remember the sensation from the previous winter, when you thought you'd never get warm again, and you feel a flicker of pride, because this time you came prepared. You are layered, armored, bricked, and bundled. The cold can scratch at the door all it likes. You're not surrendering tonight. Somewhere outside, a coyote calls into the wind. The sound drifts through the chinks in the wall, soft but distant, part of the lullaby of the frontier. You pull the covers tighter, the wool brushing against your chin, and let yourself drift toward sleep. Tomorrow, the layers will feel stiff, maybe a little smoky, definitely less clean than you'd prefer. But tonight, they're perfect. Tonight, they're the difference between misery and warmth. And as you sink into that fragile warmth, itchy, heavy, and real, you realize something quietly heroic. On this cold frontier, comfort isn't found in luxury. It's stitched together, buttoned tight, and earned one layer at a time. You wake to silence. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that makes you aware that even the air itself has frozen solid. The world outside your cocoon of blankets is pale and unmoving, the sort of cold that hums faintly in the ears before you even open your eyes. You know what waits for you? Frost on the window panes, your breath turning to mist the moment you exhale, and the terrible decision between staying still a little longer or facing the morning. Your first mistake is moving your nose out from under the covers. It's a shock that travels straight to your spine, a cold so sharp it feels personal. The blanket fortress you built last night did its job well, but it trapped the heat in only around your body. Beyond it, the world might as well be an icebox. Even the pillow feels crisp with frost at the edges. Your next brave act, uncovering a hand. You reach into the air and instantly regret it. The air bites. Your fingers curl automatically like they've touched metal in midwinter. Somewhere near the stove, the embers are nothing but dim orange dots, sighing faintly in the ashes. You'd like to rekindle them, but that would involve leaving the bed. And leaving the bed at this moment feels like an act of heroism far beyond what any human should be expected to perform before sunrise. The frontier morning doesn't care about your reluctance. It comes anyway, creeping through every gap in the log walls. You can actually hear the cold, the faint creak of the wood, the stiff snap of leather boots that froze overnight. Your breath clouds in the air like a ghost you didn't invite. If you glance toward the water basin, you'll see that your drinking water has developed a skim of ice again. Lovely. A refreshing morning beverage that crunches. You pull the blankets up to your chin, bargaining with yourself. 5 more minutes. Just 5. Maybe the sun will rise a little higher and warm the room. Maybe someone else will get up first and start the fire. You listen, hopeful, but all is still. Everyone else in the cabin is having the exact same thought. If I don't move, maybe it's not morning yet. Eventually, survival instincts beat comfort. You take a deep breath, count to 3, and throw off the covers. The cold hits you like a slap, so sharp it steals your breath for a second. You sit up, hair sticking in odd directions, layers of wool now twisted into some unholy knot of fabric. The floorboards feel like iron under your feet. Congratulations, you've just joined the ranks of the 19th century frontier. Its most reluctant heroes. People who got out of bed before spring. If you're lucky, someone, usually the person who lost the unspoken morning battle, has already poked at the coals. You shuffle toward the stove, half-dressed and half-awake, trying to remember where you left the matches. The iron door squeals as you open it, and a puff of smoke greets you. You blow on the embers, add kindling, and whisper small prayers to the fire gods of the American frontier. When the first flames catch, the relief is almost spiritual. Out comes the ritual of dressing, which in this weather feels like a cruel test. You have to peel off your sleeping layers, not all of them. But enough to put on slightly less slept-in clothes. And each moment exposed to the air is pure misery. Every movement releases another puff of cold into the room, like the cabin itself sighs frost at you. If you're a woman, you wrestle with petticoats and skirts that feel like wearing frozen laundry. If you're a man, you try not to think about how your trousers seem to have developed an independent layer of rime. There's no mirror, so you have no idea how disheveled you look, and that's probably a mercy. Your breath still fogs the air. Your fingers ache from tying laces, and you're already daydreaming about crawling back under the covers. But the day doesn't wait for your comfort. Outside, chores are waiting animals to feed, fires to relight, water to fetch, and the whole rhythm of survival to begin again. Stepping outside, your boots crunch through a crust of snow, and the sky looks like it's been washed in silver. Sometimes the cold doesn't let you stay indoors. The cabin might be full to bursting, or the fire has died beyond redemption. Maybe you're out driving cattle or caught on a late return from town. Whatever the reason, you find yourself bedding down, not beside the stove, but beneath the sky. A roof of stars and a floor of frozen earth. It's not as romantic as it sounds in dime novels. Those books make it seem like every cowboy sleeps peacefully beside a glowing campfire, hat tipped over his face, coyotes howling poetically in the distance. In reality, it's you lying under a thin blanket, staring up at the Milky Way, and wondering whether you'll wake up as a person or as a snow sculpture. The air is so clear, it feels thinner than thought. You can see every star, thousands of them, diamond-sharp and cold. There's a kind of beauty in it, but not the kind that invites sleep. Your face tingles, your eyelashes turn stiff with frost, and every breath sends a plume of vapor into the night. You tuck your chin deeper into your collar and listen to the quiet hum of the prairie, which is less a hum and more a stillness, so total it buzzes in your ears. Your bed, if we can call it that. It's a hasty nest of blankets and whatever you could scrounge, maybe your saddle under your head. A bedroll stretched out over half-frozen ground. You stamp a little hollow first, because sleeping directly on snow means you'll melt it with your body heat, and then wake up soaked and miserable. You've learned that the hard way. Straw or pine boughs are ideal, but tonight you make do with a tarp and good intentions. The fire you built earlier is your only companion. It crackles faintly, throwing shifting shadows across the nearby rocks. Each pop from the burning wood sounds absurdly loud in the emptiness. Sparks rise and vanish into the dark like a handful of tiny shooting stars. You can feel the heat only on the side facing the flames. The rest of you belongs entirely to the night. You rotate yourself occasionally, like a very reluctant rotisserie chicken, trying to avoid freezing one half of your body at a time. If you're out on a cattle drive, you can hear the animals moving slow, sleepy shapes shifting in the dark. Their breath comes in visible bursts, a reminder that they too are alive and suffering through the cold alongside you. Sometimes they grunt, or a hoof scuffs the ground, and each sound feels strangely reassuring. It means you're not entirely alone under this huge and different sky. Above, the stars never blink. You think about how these same constellations have watched over people sleeping rough for centuries. Fur trappers, explorers, native riders, and settlers long before you. The thought offers a kind of quiet comfort. You're just one small part of an unbroken chain of cold, tired humans who've stared at these same patterns and hoped for dawn. You pull the blanket higher, creating a tunnel of warm breath. It's almost cozy if you ignore your numb toes. The night stretches on. Your mind drifts to strange places. Two memories of warm rooms, feather beds, the sound of a ticking clock, the smell of bread baking. It feels like another world. You promise yourself that when you get home, you'll never take a warm bed for granted again. Spoiler, you absolutely will by the third night. At some point, snow begins to fall. It's quiet, so quiet you don't notice at first until you feel a tickle on your face. You open your eyes to see soft flakes spinning down through the firelight, catching the glow before melting. You sigh, adjust your blanket, and accept your fate. Light dusting won't kill you, probably. And there's something oddly peaceful about it, lying there as the world gently buries itself in white. The flakes melt on your skin, cold kisses from the sky. The smell of smoke mingles with the clean scent of snow, and for a fleeting moment, everything feels perfect. Your body is half frozen, your coffee long gone cold, but your mind feels strangely clear. The stars blur as the snowfall thickens, and you realize that despite the misery, this is one of those rare, crystalline nights that will live in your memory forever, even if your toes don't. Eventually, the fire dies. You hear it before you see it, the gradual quieting of the pops and crackles, the dimming of the glow. You pull your blanket tighter, curl up smaller, and breathe slow to conserve warmth. The snow continues its gentle work, building a thin layer over everything, including you. You are now, in every sense, part of the landscape. By dawn, you'll wake stiff, rhymed with frost, but alive. You'll shake off the snow, stamp your boots, and watch the horizon bleed orange and gold over the endless plains. The first light hits the drifts. The world becomes almost unbearably beautiful again, a place both cruel and kind, the way only the frontier can be. And as you pack up your things and saddle your horse, you'll think, not for the first time, maybe next time, I'll build the fire a little closer. When you finally do sleep after the fire's gone quiet and the stars have faded into a pale morning haze, your dreams tend to drift toward warmth. It's a cruel trick of the mind when your fingers are numb and your breath is frozen into your blanket. Your brain reaches for the one thing it can't have: a hearth that doesn't sputter out, a bed that doesn't bite back, a home that stays warm without a fight. Out here on the frontier, home is often an idea more than a structure. It's the smell of something baking, or the creak of a familiar floorboard, or the way lamplight falls across a table at dusk. You might not have seen your old home in years, but the memory of it travels with you, stitched invisibly into the lining of your coat, tucked somewhere behind your eyes. In dreams, you walk through those rooms again. The walls are smooth, not made of logs or sod. The windows have glass that actually keeps the wind out, and your breath doesn't cloud when you exhale. There's a bed, not a pile of straw or a bedroll, but a real bed, and the quilt on it smells faintly of lavender and sun. You can almost feel the weight of it pressing against your legs. In the corner, a fire glows steady in a proper hearth, and someone hums in the next room, a tune you forgot you knew until you hear it again. You know it's a dream, of course. Dreams have that way of being both too perfect and slightly blurred around the edges, like a painting softened by time. But for a few minutes or hours, if you're lucky, it feels real enough to soothe you. The hard edges of the world melt away, and you can finally stop shivering, at least in your mind. It's not just nostalgia, it's survival. Those dreams of home are the body's way of keeping something human alive in the cold. Out here, where comfort is rationed and solitude stretches for miles, the memory of warmth can be as vital as warmth itself. You tell yourself you're tough, that you've learned to live with frost in your beard and smoke in your lungs. But deep down, you're still someone's child, dreaming of a fire that burns steady through the night. Sometimes, the dream is less of a place and more of a feeling. You dream of the weight of a hand on your shoulder, the murmur of voices at supper, the way candlelight flickers across familiar faces. The mind fills in what the wilderness erases: laughter, conversation, the easy comfort of belonging. Even if those people are long gone or half forgotten, your brain insists on visiting them again, if only in the quiet hours when the cold has numbed everything else. You might dream of small things too, of an old mug chipped at the rim, scent of wet earth after spring rain, the soft drag of curtains in a breeze. Out here, these details become precious, the currency of another life. In the dark of a frozen prairie night, they're worth more than gold. But sometimes, the dream turns. You wake up halfway through, confused by how warm you felt only moments ago. The fire's gone cold, your blanket is stiffened in the frost, the stars above look indifferent. And you remember, with a dull ache, that home is hundreds of miles away, or gone altogether. The wind sighs through the cottonwoods, and it sounds almost like a voice calling you back, almost. Still, there's a strange comfort, even in that melancholy. To dream of home is to remember that you once had one, and that maybe, someday you'll build another. Not perfect, not grand, but something with a roof that holds, a door that shuts, and a bed that doesn't freeze. You roll over, adjust the blanket around your shoulders, and close your eyes again. Maybe the dream will return. Maybe it won't, but even without it, the idea lingers, a small, stubborn ember glowing somewhere deep inside. The same ember that keeps you striking flint at dawn, packing your gear, facing another cold morning.
You're wanting.
And remembering, and not giving up. That's what warmth really is out here. Not just the fire, or the blankets, or the breath steaming in the cold air. It's the quiet persistence of the human heart, dreaming of home even when home is far away. The world at night on the frontier is an entirely different creature, quieter, yes, but never truly still. The fire may be low. By day, the prairie might look wild and unforgiving, but by night, the West belonged to the quilt. Every home from the grand ranch house to the humblest sod cabin had one, or several, stitched together by hands that turned scraps into warmth and color into comfort. If the fire was the heart of frontier survival, the quilt was its skin, the barrier between you, and the chill that pressed in from every wall, every crack, every long winter night. You pull one over yourself now, and you can feel the story in it. Each patch is a memory. The square cut from an old dress worn to Sunday service, the faded scrap from a child's outgrown shirt, the stubbornly bright triangle that once belonged to a calico curtain. The fabric doesn't match, and it doesn't need to. Out here, beauty came from making do, and in that making, there was pride. Quilting wasn't just about staying warm. It was a language, spoken quietly through color and pattern. The log cabin quilt red square at the center for hearth and home was a favorite, and appropriately so. You can almost trace the pattern with your fingers, each strip of cloth a symbolic wall built around warmth. Then there were flying geese, triangles marching in formation, as though pointing toward some imagined horizon of spring. Each design had meaning, though sometimes that meaning was simply, we had enough scraps left for this one. In towns, quilting bees were as social as they were practical. Picture it, a half-dozen women gathered around a frame, fingers working methodically, needles flashing in candlelight. The room hums with quiet conversation, talk of weather, gossip, births, and losses. Babies sleep in baskets near the stove. Men shuffle their boots outside, pretending not to hover. Each stitch pulls the community a little closer together. You'd be surprised how much of frontier survival depended on the warmth of shared company. But at home, quilting was often solitary. Late-night work done by lamplight when the chores were finished and the children asleep. You might imagine the scene. A woman sitting by the hearth, a cup of weak tea beside her, the fire crackling low. The sound of the needle moving through fabric is rhythmic, hypnotic, like rain on a roof. Outside, the wind might wail, but here In this small circle of light, there's focus and purpose and a kind of peace. The quilts weren't just pretty, they were practical marvels. Old scraps, old flannel, even bits of worn-out coats found new life inside. Some were filled with batting if it could be spared, raw cotton, wool, or even dried grass, whatever created that vital layer between skin and cold. A well-made quilt could last decades. A poorly made one could still save you from freezing. Either way, no one cared much for perfection. The frontier wasn't an art gallery. Still, many quilts were works of art, though no one would have called them that at the time. They told stories of migration, of scarcity, of resilience, stitched into cloth. Patterns varied by region: Midwest practicality, Southern boldness, Western improvisation. Each one carried fingerprints, literal and metaphorical, of the person who made it. A mother's care, a daughter's first attempt, the hurried repairs after a harsh winter. You can imagine waking in the dark, fingers brushing the seams. You'd know who made it just by the feel. Maybe it's your wife's quilt, made before the move west, edges worn soft from years of use. Maybe it's your mother's, sent in a parcel all the way from back east, smelling faintly of lavender and distance. Or maybe it's one you helped stitch yourself, your first awkward attempt at domestic peace in a world that offered little of it. And for children, quilts were more than just warmth. They were tents, forts, capes, magic carpets, a rare softness in a hard world. A frontier child might have only one blanket to their name, but it could transform a cold night into something safe and imagined. Under a quilt, stories were told, songs hummed, and the sound of the storm outside became background music for dreams. Sometimes when someone passed away, their clothes were kept and turned into a memory quilt. It wasn't morbid, it was practical and tender at once. Life and death were part of the same rhythm, stitched together as naturally as any seam. You might sleep under the memory of someone gone and feel, if only faintly, that you were still connected. The next time you pull a quilt to your chin, notice how it smells faintly of wood smoke and soap, maybe even the faint sweetness of wool. The seams are uneven, the colors have faded, and the corners curl with age, but it's heavy in a way that feels like security. The cold outside might be endless, but here, under layers of love disguised as fabric, you have all the warmth the West could offer. There are few sounds more ominous on a winter frontier night than silence, the silence that comes when the fire dies. At first you don't notice it. The flames fade slowly, the last embers dimming behind the small iron grate. The faint hiss of sap burning away goes quiet, the orange light on the wall turns gray, and suddenly, you realize that you can see your breath. The warmth that once held back the entire wilderness slips away like a polite guest who forgot to say goodbye. You're lying in bed, half awake, listening. The log cabin is breathing, or at least that's what it sounds like. The wood creaks, the wind sighs through the chinks in the wall, the rafters groan softly as if tired of holding up the cold. The fire is gone. You know it before you even open your eyes. The air has changed, sharp now, cold enough that it bites your nose, stiffens your fingers, and makes you instantly aware of every uncovered patch of skin. You debate for a moment, that eternal frontier question: do you get up, or do you stay under the quilt and hope for morning? The bed is a cocoon of barely adequate warmth. Getting up means exposing yourself to the frozen air, where your breath will rise like smoke. But staying put means the temperature will only drop further, and soon you'll be able to see frost forming inside the cabin. Yes, inside. When the fire went out, it wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. A cabin without heat could freeze in a matter of hours. Water buckets turned to ice sculptures. Bread went hard as stone, leather cracked. Chickens, if you were lucky enough to keep them indoors, puffed up like feathered snowballs and glared at you with deep, personal resentment. Even the dog, usually stoic and unbothered, would burrow under a blanket or into your feet, sighing dramatically about your life choices. So you drag yourself up, because someone has to. Your boots are cold enough to feel like punishment. The floorboards sting your toes through the wool socks. You shuffle toward the hearth, breath clouding in the dim air. You kneel, poke at the ashes, and hope that somewhere under that gray blanket, there's a red heart still glowing, just one ember. That's all you need. If there isn't, well, that's where the real trouble starts. because starting a fire from scratch in the middle of the night, the numb fingers and half-frozen kindling, is an act of both desperation and faith. You'll strike flint against steel until sparks leap, you'll curse quietly under your breath, and you'll blow on that fragile glow like it. You remember the smell of a fire catching, that faint sweetness of pitch, the dry whisper of twigs beginning to burn. The sigh of relief as Orange returns to the room. It's one of those small victories that feel heroic when you spent weeks fighting the cold. The fire doesn't roar. It doesn't have to. It simply exists again. And with that, so do you. Of course, sometimes you didn't wake up in time. Sometimes the cold one. Families learned the hard way how fast a cabin could lose its heat. You'd wake to frost on the quilts, frost on your eyelashes, frost on the inside of the windows. Your breath would fog, and the first movement of the morning would be a violent shiver that felt like it rattled your bones. People learned to sleep in shifts, or to keep the fire fed all night. The night watch, as they called it, not romantic, not dramatic, just necessary. Children learned the importance of those embers too. They were taught to guard them like treasure. If you let the fire die, you might spend half the day coaxing it back with smoke in your eyes. Frozen fingers, and only a hope that the wood was dry enough to catch. Never let the fire go out, they were told, and they didn't. Not if they could help it. But the truth is, every homestead had those mornings. You can picture it. Everyone huddled in silence, their breath visible in the gray dawn. Someone coughs, someone mutters. Someone, probably the same someone every time, goes to fetch wood. The first flames of the new fire are slow, hesitant, like a sunrise trying to find courage. And when warmth finally returns, it feels earned. Oddly enough, there's a kind of peace in that routine. You begin to respect the balance between flame and frost. Fire isn't just comfort. It's a fragile agreement you make with the elements. It promises warmth, but only if you promise attention. Let it die, and the cold will remind you who's boss. As you settle back under your quilt, the new fire crackling softly. You feel the cabin breathe again, the walls relax, the air softens, the silence turns kind. Outside, the wind still howls across the prairie, but inside, for now, there's life. Close your eyes and feel the warmth seep back into your bones, knowing it won't last forever. But then again, nothing does out here. You'd think that after a day of chopping wood, milking cows, herding cattle, mending fences, generally arguing with nature, sleep would come easy. You'd think your head would hit the pillow, or rather, the folded coat serving as one, and you'd be unconscious within seconds. But out here on the frontier, sleep had a habit of staying just out of reach. It wasn't that people didn't want it. It was that the night refused to cooperate. You lie there under your quilts, still wrapped in the heat of the day's fatigue, staring into the shadows that seem to breathe along the cabin walls. The fire has dimmed to embers again, whispering faintly like gossip you're not supposed to hear. Outside, the wind never stops. It prowls around the cabin, sniffs at the shutters, and occasionally tests a loose board for weakness. You pull the blanket tighter, but you're not fooling yourself. You're awake, fully and unwillingly. The nights on the frontier were long in a way modern insomnia can't quite replicate. There was no gentle blue glow of a phone screen, no hum of a refrigerator or traffic in the distance. When it was quiet, it was the kind of quiet that made your ears ring. And when it wasn't, well, there were wolves, coyotes, the creak of trees bending in the cold. The unsettling thought that maybe that wasn't the wind after all. You tell yourself it's nothing. It's always nothing. Die. But your hand still strays toward the rifle by the bed, just in case. Sleep on the frontier came in patches, like badly sewn cloth. You drift for an hour or two, wake to the crack of ice expanding outside, then drift again, half in dreams, half listening. People developed their own odd rituals to lure sleep back, counting breaths, telling old songs, telling themselves stories. Some prayed. Others talked softly to whoever was awake beside them. Still up? Yeah, cold. Always. It was the closest thing to a lullaby some nights. Even when warmth wasn't the problem, worry often was. You'd lie awake thinking about the roof that needed patching, the crops that hadn't grown, the letter that never arrived from back east. There was no off switch for the mind out here. The prairie was too big, too silent, too full of reminders that you were very small and very temporary. It's strange how vast space can make you feel trapped. The body remembers every ache, too. You can feel the echo of the axe handle in your palms, the sore pull of your back, the sting of cold air in your lungs. Your muscles twitch like they're still working. Sometimes the dog snores beside the bed, the cows shuffle in the barn, and you envy them all their simple, unbothered sleep. You, meanwhile, are stuck in that timeless stretch between night and morning, the hour where every sound feels significant, every minute a small eternity. You start to notice things you wouldn't otherwise. The way the coals pulse like a heartbeat. The soft ticking of cooling metal from the stove. The smell of smoke clinging to your hair, your skin, the quilts. You listen to the rhythm of your own breath and wonder if anyone else in the world is awake at this exact moment, doing the same thing. Loneliness, out here, wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just the awareness of your own breathing. Occasionally exhaustion wins. Oh, you fall asleep just before dawn, body surrendering like a soldier off duty. The dreams are strange, vivid and unsteady, full of half-remembered people and warmer places. You dream of summer, of rain, of beds that don't creak and walls that don't breathe frost. When you finally wake, it's often with the gray light of morning already slipping through the gaps in the shutters. You never feel rested, just rearranged. And yet somehow, everyone managed. People adapted. They learned to treat sleeplessness as another chore, something to be tolerated, worked around, laughed off. They joked about the midnight shift, about being on watch even when there was nothing to guard. You might sit by the stove and whittle something, or write by lamplight, or just sit and listen to the world being cold. There was a strange companionship in knowing others nearby were doing the same thing. Insomnia on the frontier wasn't just restlessness. It was survival with your eyes open. You were always half alert, part of your mind tuned to the wildness outside, part of it still chasing the comfort of dreams. The line between the two blurred easily. Some said the land itself wouldn't let people sleep too deeply, that it demanded your attention even in rest. Maybe they were right, because when morning finally came, that pale gold light creeping across the frost, you'd feel something like relief, even if you hadn't slept more than an hour or two. The world had endured another night, and so had you. You'd rise stiffly, feed the fire again, and tell yourself you'd rest better tonight. Of course you probably wouldn't. But out here hope was a habit too. And as the cabin filled once more with the smell of wood smoke and coffee, you could almost believe that tonight, just maybe, the land would let you sleep. You don't notice it all at once. Cold doesn't vanish overnight. It retreats slowly, like a stubborn guest edging toward the door, but refusing to leave without one last story. One morning you wake up and realize the air inside the cabin feels softer. The windows aren't frosted over. The fire, for once, isn't the only thing keeping you alive. You can still see your breath, but it's faint now, lazy. It curls in the morning light instead of clinging to the dark. Spring is coming. You step outside, half expecting winter to change its mind and slap you back inside. But the world has shifted. The snow is melting, not gracefully, but earnestly in patches and puddles. With little rivers running off the roof and through the yard, the sound is strange at first, a constant dripping, a low trickle that feels almost musical after months of silence. You can smell earth again. It's not frozen dirt, but real earth, damp, heavy, alive. The scent is so strong it makes you dizzy, like you've forgotten what breathing was supposed to feel like. Your boots sink into the thawing mud as you walk, squelching in a way that would have annoyed you any other season. Oh, it's glorious. Every puddle feels like proof of survival. The snow still clings in the shade, dirty and stubborn, but it's losing. You can see the edges curling, retreating. The world is defrosting, and so are you. For the first time in months, you don't dread the night. You still build a fire, but not out of desperation. The flames are smaller now, more symbolic, a quiet habit rather than a matter of life and death. When you lie down, you can stretch your legs without worrying about drafts, clawing up your blanket. The cabin smells faintly of wet wood and melting wax. It's not comfort exactly, but it's something gentler. Sleep comes differently in the spring. It's deeper, easier. Your body, having been clenched against cold for months, finally begins to relax. The ache in your shoulders loosens. You no longer wake every hour to feed the fire or check for frost creeping in. The air hums softly with the sound of melting, that delicate rhythmic drip-drip that plays like the world's most patient lullaby. You close your eyes and realize for the first time in a long while that you're not shivering. It's hard to describe the way fatigue changes when survival is no longer an emergency. During the winter, sleep was stolen, grabbed in pieces, guarded like a secret. Now it feels given. You don't fall into it from exhaustion. You sink into it, like the earth itself is finally allowing you to rest. The heavy quilts that once trapped your warmth now feel too much. You kick one aside and smile in the dark, a small act of rebellion against the months of cold tyranny. Outside, the snowmelt keeps talking. You hear water moving through the cracks, dripping off eaves, pooling beneath the fence posts. The coyotes have quieted. Even the wind sounds friendlier, less like a threat and more like an invitation. When you wake in the middle of the night, it isn't from fear or cold, but from habit, and for once there's no need to move. The fire is still glowing, the air doesn't bite. You lie there, half dreaming, watching the faint silver of moonlight on the thawing fields. Spring on the frontier wasn't gentle. It came with mudslides and flooding, and the ground turned to soup before it firmed up again. But even with all that, it was a kind of deliverance. The long sleep deprivation of winter began to fade. People started smiling again. Neighbors came by more often, bringing leftover preserves, or just conversation. Someone might even mention that the cows were calving, or that a wagon road was finally clear. It was as if everyone collectively exhaled for the first time in months. And with that relief came a new kind of tired, not the brittle, defensive exhaustion of cold survival, but the pleasant heaviness of knowing you've made it through. You'd crawl into bed, not clutching at warmth, but letting yourself drift. Outside, frogs begin to sing from half-frozen ponds. The sound is clumsy and sweet and oddly reassuring. You realize you've missed the sound of life. You sleep longer now. Dreams come easier. They're not of frozen rivers or endless nights, but of small, ordinary things. The color of grass returning. The creak of wagon wheels and soft earth. The smell of baking bread when the windows are open again. Kind of dreams that feel like waking up from a long, hard season. By the time morning light spills through the cracks in the shutters, you feel almost human again. You stretch, yawn, and listen. No wind howling, no rafters groaning, just dripping, birdsong, and the faint crackle of embers. You smile to yourself, a little dazed by how quiet the world has become without winter's teeth in it. For months, you've slept like a soldier under siege. Now finally, you sleep like someone home from a war, not because everything is perfect, but because the battle has paused. The land is soft again, the night's merciful. You've earned this sleep, you've earned this peace. There's a moment, after months of cold, when warmth stops being an emergency and starts feeling like a luxury. You notice it the way you denotice a friend you had realized you missed subtly, with a kind of startled gratitude. One afternoon, the sun slants through the cabin window. Golden and honest, and for the first time since autumn, you take your coat off indoors without bracing for regret. You sit there for a long time, hand resting on the table, feeling the light soak into your skin. It's a quiet indulgence, one only a winter survivor can appreciate. Out here on the frontier, warmth was never taken for granted. It wasn't just about heat. It was about safety, comfort, and sanity. You had lived through nights when you could see your breath from your pillow, when the fire was a fickle deity demanding constant tribute, when your toes were a daily gamble. The air itself feels soft again. The fire in the stove burns low, not because you're afraid of running out of wood, but because you can. You finally have enough wood, enough light, enough calm. You start to realize how warmth changes everything. The sound of laughter returns to the cabin, tentative at first, then unguarded. You eat slower, talk longer, move with less urgency. You might even open the door in the middle of the day to let fresh air in, a dangerous thought a month ago. You sit on the step, squinting into the sun, and think, so this is what normal feels like. The irony is that it never feels normal when you finally get it back. It feels miraculous. You remember how the old-timers used to say that warmth makes people lazy? Maybe it does. But out here, a little laziness is a kind of healing. You linger over your coffee. You take naps you don't need. You stretch out on the quilt in the afternoon light like a cat, half asleep, half amazed that your fingers aren't stiff from cold. Every beam of sunlight feels like a small gift you have to use before it slips away. The frontier didn't offer many luxuries, but warmth, real warmth, was the closest thing to wealth most people ever knew. It wasn't stored in banks. It was stored in firewood stacks, in wool socks, in the thickness of your roof. Families bragged about their chimneys, about how long their hearths could hold coals overnight. A well-sealed cabin was like a castle, and a full woodshed was as good as a trust fund. When spring truly settles in, warmth begins to gather from everywhere. The earth itself exhales. You can smell pine and thawed soil, a faint sweetness from the first shoots pushing through. The cabin walls stop creaking from contraction. Even your old tin cup, once so painfully cold in the mornings, now warms to your touch. You start to leave the fire untended at night, daring the chill to return, and it doesn't. You wake up to birds instead of your own chattering teeth. But warmth on the frontier carried a kind of bittersweet edge. You never fully trusted it. Every comfortable day felt borrowed, every mild night a temporary ceasefire with nature. You'd find yourself glancing at the sky, measuring the wind, calculating how many cords of wood you might need next winter. Survival had trained you to expect the return of cold, and that expectation made the present warmth feel sacred. It's hard to explain the pleasure of something as simple as holding a warm mug in both hands while sitting by an open window. There's no drama to it, no struggle, no grand revelation. It's just the absence of tension, the stillness of a body that no longer has to fight for every breath of comfort. You sit there, eyes half closed, and think how strange it is that something so basic could feel so rare. And maybe that's the quiet truth of frontier life. Comfort was never permanent. Every soft day carried a memory of frost behind it. Every warm night reminded you how icily the balance could turn. You didn't grow entitled to it. You grew reverent. Warmth wasn't a right. It was grace. Later, as dusk settles and you light the stove anyway, habit more than need, you watch the flames dance behind the grate. The sound is still soothing, even now that it's no longer a matter of survival. You can almost hear the echo of those long winter nights, when you'd sit in the same spot, listening to the same crackle, praying it wouldn't fade. Now it's just background music, gentle, alive, harmless. You wrap yourself in a quilt, not from necessity, but from fondness. The fire hums low, the room glows faintly, and for the first time, you feel like you've earned this peace. You think about all the nights you lay awake, the frost on the windows, the numb fingers feeding logs into the dark, and realize those moments gave this one its meaning. Warmth only feels luxurious because you remember what it cost. Outside, the prairie settles into twilight, soft and forgiving. Inside, you stretch your legs, close your eyes, and smile. For the first time in months, you're not surviving warmth, you're simply enjoying it. You wake up to central heating, electric blankets, and the faint hum of appliances, the mechanical lullaby of the modern world. Somewhere a thermostat clicks softly, and without thinking, you roll over and steal another 10 minutes of comfort. Outside, winter still exists, but it's polite now, distant, softened by insulation and double-glazed windows. You've inherited a kind of quiet miracle, the guarantee of warmth without the nightly battle. And yet, if you listen carefully in the still hours before dawn, when the house sighs and the wind brushes past, you can almost hear the old world breathing beneath it. That soft pop of expanding wood, that subtle chill that sneaks under the door. That primal alertness when you sense a drop in temperature. It's the ghost of the frontier reminding you what warmth used to mean. You make coffee without gloves. You pad across a floor that isn't frozen. Open the tap and get hot water instantly as if by a spell. The small conveniences pile up, invisible but astonishing. You don't have to check the fire or bank the coals, or wake at midnight to feed the stove. You can turn a dial, press a button, and command the very element that once ruled human sleep. Still, there's a part of you that misses something about that old struggle, not the discomfort, but the intimacy of it. Back then, warmth was earned, not assumed. People slept close, shared blankets, and measured time by how long the embers lasted. The fire wasn't just heat, it was company. It gave off light that made shadows dance, smoke that flavored the air, and a sound that said, "You're alive." Today, warmth is silent, invisible, almost antiseptic. You rarely even notice it until the bill arrives. But memory has a strange way of lingering in the body. You might stand near a space heater and find yourself holding out your hands as if to a campfire. You might watch the steam from your breath on a cold morning and feel that old instinct to guard it, to treasure it. It's the same reflex that made your great-great-grandparents tuck embers in ash to carry between cabins, a flicker of life passed hand to hand through the dark. If you could take one of those pioneers and set them in your living room tonight, thermostat at a steady 72, a soft glow from the radiator, they'd probably laugh, or cry, or both. They'd marvel at the softness of your blankets, the luxury of sleeping without fear of frost. But they might also find it strange that we've made warmth so easy, and yet still sleep so restlessly. The cold once demanded respect. Now it's an inconvenience. Maybe in making life easier, we've lost some of that quiet reverence. You sip your coffee and glance out the window. Snow still falls, but you watch it from behind glass, not from a shivering cabin doorway. It's beautiful now, not threatening, just decoration, a reminder of the distance between then and now. You imagine the settlers huddled under quilts, the hiss of their fire fading, their breath fogging the dark. You think, we're not so different after all. We still chase comfort, still crave safety, still need something warm to hold in the night. We've just changed the methods. Sometimes, on especially cold nights, you might turn off the heater for a while, not out of necessity, but curiosity. To listen to the silence again, to feel the faint bite of air against your skin, to remember that warmth isn't just temperature, it's a feeling, a state of grace. You pull the blanket closer, light a candle, and in that flickering glow, the centuries shrink. You could be anywhere, anytime. That's the modern echo, the reminder that our comfort is built on generations who didn't have it. Every soft bed, every warm room, every easy breath in winter is a quiet inheritance from people who learned the hard way how fragile warmth really is. You can almost hear them still, the shuffle of boots on frozen floorboards, the whisper of a log splitting, the murmur of a prayer before sleep. They're not gone, they're just resting, finally, in the same warmth we now take for granted. So tonight, when the wind presses against the window and the heater hums softly to life, take a moment, feel the air on your skin. Remember the embers, the quilts, the long nights of watching the fire fade. Remember that warmth was once an act of survival, and that every easy breath you take now is the result of someone else's sleepless night in a frozen cabin. Feeding the flame that refused to die. As you drift towards sleep, wrapped in your modern cocoon of effortless comfort, you might smile and whisper to yourself a little joke, a little prayer, may the fire never go out. The story of sleep in the Wild West was never just about rest. It was about endurance, about the quiet courage of people who faced nights longer than comfort allowed, who turned freezing dark into a space for dreaming. They didn't simply go to bed. They built warmth, one ember at a time, and guarded it like treasure. When we speak of the frontier, we picture gunfights, gold rushes, dusty trails, but the truer story is smaller, slower, and softer.
Ow.
It's a woman sewing one more quilt patch by lantern light. It's a man rising at midnight to stir the coals so his children wouldn't tea-wake shivering. It's neighbors sharing a blanket, a log, or a moment of laughter when the cold got cruel. Each night, the frontier went quiet. And in that silence, you could hear the sound of a civilization trying to outlast the dark, the hiss of the fire, the creak of timber, the wind searching for a crack in the wall. Sleep was a gamble, comfort a luxury, and yet, somehow people dreamed. Those dreams built the world we now inherit. The warmth you feel tonight, the steady hum of heat through the vents, the layered softness of your blanket, the calm security of your walls, all of it is their legacy. Every convenience, every quiet night of rest, began with someone who refused to surrender to the cold. So as you lie there, listening to the gentle rhythm of your own breath, imagine that you're part of that same story. You re not so far from the settlers in their log cabins or the travelers beneath the open stars. You carry the same need for safety, the same search for peace, the same gratitude when warmth finds you. Sighed. Winter still whispers across the earth, unchanged, eternal. But inside, we've mastered a kind of magic. Fire without fear, warmth without struggle, sleep without frost. And yet the echo of that old battle hums quietly beneath it all, reminding us that comfort was earned, not given. So tonight, before you drift off, think of the long line of sleepers who came before you, the ones who built the fire. tended the flame, and dreamed of a future where the cold could no longer command them. You're living that dream now, wrapped in the warmth they made possible, breathing in the peace they longed for. And as you close your eyes, let that thought settle over you like a quilt, that even in the deepest cold, humanity never stopped reaching for warmth, and that somehow the fire has never gone out. Have sweet dreams, good night.